Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today, co-host Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, sir.
Good. Our president has left the country. Today, he's not president of the United States, he's president of the world. And now he's over improving relations with Vietnam. He's going to Vietnam. And it is in the news, and there's lots of things to discuss about it because, in a way, it's stated that he's on a diplomatic trip. He wants to improve trade with Vietnam. Maybe this is going to be good. But on second thought, I got to thinking about it. Is this going to be number 3 for me? You know, I have praised the opening up the door and communications with Cuba, and then also with Iran. I thought that was good. Is this going to be another one? Well, I don't think so. Matter of fact, opening up the doors with Vietnam has already occurred a while ago, and that, of course, was a bilateral trade agreement with Vietnam by President George W. Bush. So he started off his administration rather well because that was good. And I can remember so often in the 08 and the 12 campaign sort of emphasizing the fact that things were so much better with Vietnam. And just think of the 20 years that the French and Americans were killing the Vietnamese in war. And I said, we've been at peace and we're trading with them and talking with them and traveling with them. And just think how much more was achieved in peace than at war. But this is a mixed bag right now. We want to get along with Vietnam, but quite frankly, I don't see what he's doing today anywhere close to opening the doors in, say, Cuba.
Yeah, and I think the huge difference is, believe it or not, we have to praise when necessary. You know, what opened up under President George W. Bush in terms of bilateral trade, business to business sorts of things, that is now improved upon by this current trade deal. And here's what National Security Advisor spokesman Ben Rhodes said about it. This is the big twist. Looking forward to a new chapter of partnership on a range of regional security issues, the U.S. lifted the arms embargo on Vietnam. So this is very, very different than opening it up to business. This is opening up to arms purchases.
And it didn't take too long for a senator from Arizona to speak up and really praise this. And he emphasized the military part. They're going to be military allies, and then we're going to sell more weapons, or maybe loan them money to sell more, for them to buy more weapons. But obviously, this is a business deal, not in the free market, but it's a business deal for the arms manufacturers, the military-industrial complex. They're delighted with this. And of course, the one world people who would like to see, more big government. He's traveling all over the Far East, and he'll be going to Japan, I believe. But the Trans-Pacific Partnership is a big deal. And Vietnam wants to do this, and Japan wants to participate. So this has a lot more to do than this is more of an entangling alliance rather than just bipartisan trade agreement with another country, which is technically, I believe, the way to go. It should be by the Congress rather than just the president. But nevertheless, if the Congress authorizes it and you can have bilateral agreements, I think this is the way to go. And I got to thinking, I wonder throughout all of history, how much trade has occurred, maybe 3,000-4,000 years of history. Nobody had trade agreements, but there was a lot of interconnectedness. But when they had the greatest interconnectedness in those times, it was usually because there was a single currency. It was a gold standard, and people knew about that, and that brought people together. It wasn't a world government that did it.
And I think you're right, the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, is a kind of a world government, and it is sort of sucking Vietnam into it. There was an interesting video a couple of weeks ago where a member of the European Parliament wanted to go and read a copy of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which neither you nor I nor any average American can read. It's classified. It's a classified trade deal. And they followed him with a video where he had to sign away these non-disclosure agreements, and he had to put in his fingerprints and all of these things just to get in this. And of course, they had to cut the camera off because he got into this secret room to read this secret deal. Now, does that sound like something that's going to open up trade for the world?
No, hardly. And then you wonder, well, if it isn't the people of this country clamoring, that we do these things. Matter of fact, I sense that the people are looking for something quite opposite than more of these trade agreements, because you look, who's been getting the largest crowd, and it's been Trump with a more, not a free trade policy, as well as Sanders, and they're getting a lot of support. At the same time, this whole momentum shift, the pivot to Asia, this is a big deal. So there's somebody who's pulling the strings behind the scenes, and of course that's the deep state, and I'm sure there are many members that we can sort of guess at, but I don't think they get together and meet, but they know how to use the system, and they support these efforts, and I don't think it's free trade that they're after.
And I think the lifeblood of the deep state is money that's generated by permanent conflicts elsewhere, everywhere in the world. And here's a couple of stats about Vietnam. They have a $5 billion military budget. Doesn't sound big compared to ours, but it's a very small country. And it's up, just in the past 10 years, it's up from $1 billion to $5 billion. 8% of the total government spending goes to the military in Vietnam. But here's the kicker, two things. First of all, Vietnam is joining us in our pivot toward aggression with China, not toward Asia. But the other thing is 80% of Vietnam's military purchases come from Russia right now. So this is less about Vietnam and more about the U.S. confrontation with Russia and China.
Yeah, this is a penalty to Russia, that we're trying to cut them out. And I don't think there's really been a pivot. I think there's been an addition. We're still very engaged on the borders of Russia. Now we're over there engaged in annoying China. And of course, we pick sides. Our president said we never pick sides. So we're on the side of Vietnam in trying to hold back China. But I think that has a lot to do with this, that we're hiring these people. They want the weapons to defend themselves. The American people don't want us to send more troops, but we can send ships and planes over there to provoke things. In this age, when we shouldn't even be close to having a major war break out, we have both the Russians and the Americans and the Chinese just confronting each other, and it's sort of like I dare you in high school. I dare you to hit me or push me or something like that, and we just fly and see how close we can get. Why are they looking for trouble, other than the fact that maybe this does motivate some Americans to say, well, it's very dangerous out there. Nobody's screaming and hollering that the candidates all want to rebuild our military, and we know how much we're spending, and but the deep state wants more military spending. There's no doubt about that.
And this is the theme that we keep hitting on, is the big ripoff of the American people. They're being lied to and told that all these threats are out there, so they won't raise too much of a fuss when so much of their money is taken from them or inflated away out of them. And this is the huge ripoff, why people live so well. The other thing I saw was looking at just a sort of a few of the headlines about the trip, and one of them that's interesting that struck me as funny is, I think it was Time magazine or one of them complained, this is terrible, the human rights problems there, and he shouldn't be over there. Look at look at the Vietnamese electoral system. The political parties choose the candidates. And I thought, it sounds kind of like the superdelegates.
One question I'm surprised I don't get asked very often, but it's something I think about, and that is, we take a position of free trade. That means the individual corporation, business person, individual can spend his money where he wants. He can travel and buy and this sort of thing. Free trade is free trade. So American companies can sell what they have to any country that they want, and as long as they're not getting subsidies and they're not getting loans from the government, it's not managed trade and protectionism, because this managed trade is really protectionism in disguise. But the whole thing is what about a company that has weapons and they're in a free trade? We're in a free trade. Can they and should they be able to just sell any weapons they want to anybody? And I've come up with a position which is sort of like, if making a rifle is so mundane and regular that every country can and have them, that for a private company to sell rifles to somebody, under those conditions, I would say that there shouldn't be a federal prohibition against selling something like that. But if it's a major weapon system, something to do with nuclear submarines or some type of surveillance for security and things that we, the taxpayers, paid for, it shouldn't be owned by the corporations. They already got their subsidies and they already got, paid for their developments way over and above, what the market cost would be. So I would say that I would support the position that a private company, even under total free trade, should have the right to sell weapons that are highly sophisticated and have been developed by the American taxpayer.
Yeah, and if they're doing business with the government with these weapon systems, they shouldn't be allowed to sell them overseas because they are privatizing the profits from the overseas arms sales, while they're socializing the costs of research and development.
Right, and there's been a lot of that for a long time. But the big question is what is the ultimate goal, the pivot? The pivot makes you think, well, they're going to give up on what's going on in Eastern Europe. But I think it is a two-front war going on, and I think that it's really the goal is one world government, one way or the other, and because it's very clear, even the so-called assimilation of Europe and how it happens here with government force and subsidies and responding to conditions we create and all this, it's all like an excuse why we need more government. And I think everybody would know my position. I think the problems come from the fact that we've had too much government involvement, too much government spending, taking funds and livelihoods from the people and not allowing people to make these decisions rather than the politicians. So I think one of the biggest threats to the country today is the deep state. I do not believe for a minute, despite the independence of some of our candidates, that they're dealing with the deep state. I think the deep state is still there and that it's not going to go away because they really don't have answers. Because if we decided we didn't want any special interest government and we had the person with slash, I imagine you saw something on the internet the other day, there was a young guy that just don't take the food stamps away from my mother. You're going to have trouble from me. The entitlement mentality of the poor who have been taught that, my livelihood comes from the government. I'm entitled to it. I have a right to it. But the businessman is like that too. Do you think the people in the banking system and the military-industrial complex, if we made it tough to sell some of these weapons overseas and take away some of their protectionism that they have already built into the system through the WTO? I mean, they have a lot going on, but it's all sold as a bill of, we need the TPP because that's going to free up markets. And just recently, some of the huge tariffs that have been placed on goods that are going back and forth between China and the United States. We put on huge tariffs, but I'm sure that was in retaliation. So you don't hear that, you go to the WTO, they'll give you permission to do this. So to me, it's a real tragedy.
I remember it was kind of a wake-up call back on the Hill in the early to mid 2000s when you were very strong in your get out of the UN position and very vocal and taking the lead on that. And we were all surprised that the conservatives were not that enthusiastic about such a thing. And it came to dawn on me, at least through the meetings, that they didn't have a problem with the UN, but they wanted to gradually and eventually come to control the UN and use that as a global tool for U.S.-led one world government. And that's why with the whole South China Sea thing, the U.S. is citing the Law of the Sea Treaty, which we refused to even sign.
I had a sort of an awakening after 1994. The Republicans are in charge. That sort of gave me the incentive to try and go back and see maybe they were serious about it. So in '96, I ran again, and the Republicans were in charge of the Congress. So when the foreign aid bill would come up, that was always a big deal. Republicans hadn't been in office for 40 years. Foreign aid. So it comes up, and I'd offer amendments. They wouldn't cut any foreign aid. And there was one time the bill came up and it was a large increase. And they were trying to get it through without even having a vote. And I wasn't one that was always a strategy guy to go down there and see if I could block something for a day, but I happened to be nearby, and these people shouldn't get away with it. So I had the toughest time. You may even remember I asked for the vote and they totally ignored me. Then I got a little bit annoyed, but finally got a vote on it. But it's this pretense, and they say, well, foreign aid is different, and it's not a principle. It's not that there's nothing wrong with. They don't accept the idea there's something wrong with taking money from poor people in this country and giving it to rich people in other countries. Some countries are more equal than others, and some are more into the military aid than the other. So, but the principle obviously should be, in all this trade business, is that the money belongs to the people, and there shouldn't be the taking money from people in order to subsidize and pass out money around the world. Now, we're getting away with it because the dollar's been strong, but I believe that condition is going to change.
Yeah. They call this part of Obama's farewell tour. And that sounds nice, but unfortunately his crowning achievement, one of the things he's doing there is he's having dinner with this fellow Anthony Bourdain, who runs a travel show on CNN, and he tries foreign foods and this sort of thing. So if his farewell tour had to do with eating with Bourdain in Vietnam and visiting with officials and these sorts of things, that would be a more appropriate sort of crown on his achievements than all of these things he's introducing.
Now, I do want to bring up one other subject. I don't think we've mentioned it yet, because we need to close here in a minute, but that has to do with the human rights issue.
Oh, yeah.
The human rights issue is always a big issue in doing this. And the instruction from the left, which is reasonable instruction to be concerned about the human rights in these countries, whether it's China or Vietnam, and if we're going to do all this for them, it should be conditions, treat your prisoners a little bit better, don't have political prisoners. But I always objected to that, mainly because I didn't believe we had authority to do it. But then I also thought it was very hypocritical. I mean, we are not angels when we treat our prisoners. And when you think of how abusive we are in incarcerating people due to the insanity of the war on drugs and putting people who are nonviolent, therefore they could be called political prisoners. We have 5% of the population, 25% of the incarcerations, and more than anybody else, we can condemn, we can go over to China and say, you don't treat your people right. You have too many people that haven't been treated. But yeah, what about our whistleblowers? Our whistleblowers get put in prison, and they're incarcerated. People who stand on the Constitution and defend, make the position that the way our income tax is collected is unconstitutional. They can go to jail and kept there. That to me sounds like a political, political position, and yet people just say, well, that's different. We'll just ignore that for now. But I think that is a horror, because it's such a hypocrisy for us to go over. And besides, who's our best friends in the Middle East? I think it's a country called Saudi Arabia, and we never lecture them. Matter of fact, because of our policies with Saudi Arabia, the abuse of our liberties here at home have been made much worse. And when it comes to the motivation of the Patriot Act and things like that, and also the ability of the Saudis to not be held accountable, and also not find out exactly what they were up to in the commission reports in the 28 pages.
Yeah. Well, Senator Tom Cotton disagrees with you. I don't know if you saw this. He said we need to incarcerate a lot more people in the U.S. That was his thing.
Well, you know what, Daniel, maybe that's not too bad. If we started incarcerating politicians who didn't obey the Constitution, that might be a little bit different. But no, I don't think we need to incarcerate more people who didn't commit real crimes or a violent crime. And what we need are a lot less laws and a lot less intervention overseas, a lot less theft from our government. In a moral sense, our government is at the most guilt, because they think taking from one person and giving to another, whether it's given to a rich or poor person, is morally superior to allowing people to live on their own and have their freedom freedom and choice on what kind of lifestyle they want, freedom of choice on where they work and how they spend their money, and to protect their property. But that doesn't seem to be of interest. There's a lot of frustration out there. I'm just hoping that we can help sort out the frustration and why the American people are so upset and annoyed with the conditions today, and not say, well, what we need is more authoritarianism in our government to punish and redistribute wealth because the entitlement system is just not managed well. We need better and fairer managers of the entitlement system, and that's going to take care. I think what we need in this country is more individuals, more people in the theoretical branch and also in our government to come and realize what we need is more liberty and understand the important historical fact that the freer a country is, the more prosperous it is. And that is what they don't believe. They like this idea of thinking that they can get something for nothing. It hasn't worked in the past and it's not going to work now. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.